webinar casting from a safe distance in Chelsea's office, but my name is Chelsea McGuire. I'm the Director of Government Relations at the Arizona Farm Bureau.
And I'm Katie Akins, the Director of Education here at the Arizona Farm Bureau.
And we are super excited to join you for our first webinar series of the 2020-21 school year. Whether you're joining online in real time or whether you're watching this some other time, we're just really happy to have you and talk about some of the issues that face agriculture. And today, talking about what agriculture looks like kind of generally in Arizona. Before we get started though, just a couple of housekeeping items. If you're familiar with our webinar series, you'll know this is a brand new platform. So we've got a new way to come to you, just some little quirks about the system. If you do want to ask a question, we can't hear you, we can't see you, but the Q&A box is open. So please feel free to ask throughout the presentation as many questions as you want. We'll do anything that we can to make sure that we answer those questions during the presentation. And if you're watching on the recording, obviously you can't ask questions in real time, but you can always ask us questions with our contact information that we will share. So I think that's it.
I think that's it, and I'm super excited to start out our webinar series with a very basic topic for most of us, and that just is, what is Arizona agriculture exactly? And I'm hoping that you guys saw our promo for this one, and if you did, you learned very quickly that I think Arizona agriculture is all about the cacti, but of course we know that that's not exactly true. So.
No, not quite. And we laugh about it and we kind of make a joke about it, but it's actually a question we get a lot. We live in the desert. There's not farming here. Someone who comes from the Midwest or even from just other states in the West where you see it a little more often, and they're shocked to learn that Arizona agriculture is this massive, diverse industry. So we wanted to show you guys a little overview of that. We have our Arizona agriculture in 60 seconds. So you'll get to just see some of the beautiful things that we grow here in the state.
Well, there you have it. a little taste of some of Arizona agriculture, and as you can see, it is more than cactus. You can see the cactus in here. We'll maybe chat about that a little bit later today as well. But for the rest of today, we're going to kind of talk more specifically about those commodities that are being produced by our farmers and ranchers every day here in Arizona. Aside from the cactus, of course. So as you can see, Arizona agriculture is a pretty big deal here for our state's economy. It's a $23.3 billion, yes, that's with the B, Chelsea,
with the B.
$billion to our state's economy. So it is definitely a big deal.
Very, very big deal. And, it's a diverse deal too, right? It's this big deal, it's this big industry, but sometimes I think it helps to sort of break it down. And so we see a little bit more of like the specifics of what it looks like. So when we talk about that $23.3 billion industry, that comprises about 19,000 farms, a little more than 19,000, with 32,796 farmers. Now, obviously, that means that there are more farmers than farms. You've got family partnerships, you've got corporate partnerships where you have multiple people who have an ownership interest in that farm. So that's why that number looks that way. In terms of how much of our state is taken up by agriculture, farmland is about 26.2 million acres. Again, the easy way to think of an acre is the size of a football field. So that's a whole lot of football that we may not be playing this fall, but you know, we can still use that metaphor, right, to figure out what agriculture looks like. We talk a lot about the average age of a farmer too, right? We're hoping that by showing these kinds of presentations and having these conversations with you guys, that average age is going to bump down here in the next few years. But right now, it's at about 61 years. Arizona is one of the top in the nation as well for the percentage of female farmers.
Girl power.
That's right. Almost half of our farmers are female, which is a lot higher than the national average. And a lot of that actually has to do with this next stat, our Native American farmers, because there are quite a few female Native American farmers, especially on reservation and tribal lands. And so that's just a fun little thing we get to brag about.
Yeah.
And then this little stat.
This one was never more apparent than during COVID, I think, right? When we were talking about education and everything, and people realize how important the internet is and that connectivity is. And I think some people felt the pain of some of our farmers and ranchers over this COVID and not having the internet, because we do take that for granted, right? Here in the city, I have it. I can get on my phone, get on any app, any technology, and get the latest information, share out my information. But as you can see, 57% of Arizona farmers and ranchers have that reliable broadband and connectivity. So there's still a pretty significant portion that doesn't have access.
Yeah,
which is sad.
It's sad and it's tough, and we're thankful to have some of our political leaders who are really trying to do something about that, talking about rural broadband. But that's a whole other webinar topic. So
yes, it is.
But just keep that in mind. All right, so Katie, we talked about those stats, but what does that mean exactly? Like, tell me what it looks like. Where do we really get our food from all of these farmers we talked about?
Well, you know me, I always like to break things down pretty simple terms, right?
That's
easy to remember.
So about you.
I kind of classify everything as small, medium, and large,
okay,
right? And that's how I want people to imagine the size of farms and ranches when we're talking about agriculture. And so oftentimes when I ask people, like, do you think the majority of our farms are small, medium, or large? Think about what you hear in the media. What would you say, Chelsea?
From what I hear in the media, I would definitely say that like all of our farms are now these massive, huge farms.
Right? They're these large farms. Any word you can throw at it, but they are these large farms. But the reality is when you're looking at farming and ranching, especially here in the state of Arizona, it's kind of got that triangle turned on its head, as you can see, because the majority of our farms in this state are actually classified as small farms. That's 60% of our farms.
Wow.
Yeah, which is surprising to a lot of people. Our medium-sized farms, they make up just about 30% of our farms. So I'm going to put you on the spot, some quick math. 60% are small, 30% are medium, which means those large farms are only how much?
10%. 10%. That econ degree comes in handy, you guys.
The large farms make up just 10%. So that's a pretty good overview of the size of them. But I think that brings us to a little different conversation when we talk about where our food comes from, right? Because if you're talking about small farms, things that are under 10 acres in size, and remember, you said an acre was about the size of a football field. So if we're thinking 10 football fields or less, what kind of food can come from there? What amount? What yields, right? So we're going to think of it a little bit different. And now I want to ask you, knowing these percentages, 60, 30, and 10, where would you say the majority of our food is coming from?
Well, if you're
small,
looking,
medium, or large.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at just the percentage of how many farms, wouldn't it make sense to say that small farms are producing closer to 60% of our food?
It would, but let's see the answer. Just 2%. Remember, small farms are that kind of 10 acres or less, so not as much when it comes to the yields. They just can't produce as much because there's not as much volume of land or crops. So our medium-sized farms, they produce about 18% of our food. So some quick math brings you back to 10% of our farms produce 80% of our food, right? Now, we're not bringing this to your attention to say, oh, there's a lot of small farms, but they're not producing a lot, or look at how much those large farms can do, even though there's not as many.
This isn't a value proposition.
No, I think this is a great part to have a conversation about how all size farms are very important when we enter that conversation of feeding the world. And what is that going to look like as we enter 2050 with nearly 10 billion people, when that farm population keeps decreasing, right? Less than 2% people are farming and ranching today, and the number of farms and farm acres. So I think this is just a good graphic to keep in perspective that all size farms are important, because if all of those large farms went away, we couldn't get to 100%. And if the small farms went away, we couldn't get to 100%. So they are all equally important.
Absolutely. That's a really good point to make. And with that sort of equally important, right, when we talk about small and large farms, it's really important that they have all of the tools that they could possibly use to get to that goal of feeding the entire world, and especially as our population continues to boom. And so this gets us into those conversations about organic versus conventional, all of the ways of not just where's our food coming from, but how is it being grown. So there's really about 4 categories, right, that we kind of want to look into. So there's the conventional category, organic, a blend of both conventional and organic, and then there's natural. So Katie, help us break it down. What do these mean when we use these terms?
Sure. Well, Chelsea, since I can't see all of our friends out there, you're going to be our class for today, okay?
Perfect.
So I'm going to ask you a series of like yes/no questions.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm a conventional farmer. If I am a conventional farmer, can I grow GMOs?
Yes, you can.
Okay. If I'm a conventional farmer, can I use chemical pesticides and fertilizers?
I would believe so, yes.
Yeah. Okay. If I'm a conventional farmer, can I, if I have an animal that gets sick, let's say I'm a conventional dairy farmer and I have a cow, she gets mastitis. Can I give her an antibiotic to help her get through that infection?
You can. You can't slaughter her right after you give her that antibiotic or take milk from her.
But you gotta wait for those withdrawal periods. But we can definitely give her those antibiotics to help her clear up that infection and get her back to optimum health, right? Okay. Now, if I'm a conventional farmer, rancher, I've got some cattle, can I implant an implant, growth promoting hormone?
Yeah, absolutely.
I can. Okay, interesting. All right, so that's just kind of a wide brand. You know the words. There we go.
Yes.
That's where we're going with conventional, okay? So kind of that 1,000-foot level. So I'm going to ask you those same questions now in relation to organic.
Okay.
And I want to know your thoughts, okay? So again, if I am an organic producer, can I grow GMOs?
Well, probably not.
No, not in the sense of those transgenic organisms,
Right.
those biotech crops, right?
Right.
Definitely, that is one of the stipulations of being organic, is you cannot grow GMOs. How about if I have an animal that gets sick, can I give it an antibiotic?
No.
I can't. I've got to try some other method to help her get through it and fight that infection, but antibiotics is not a tool that I have in my toolbox to use as an organic producer. Can I use growth promoting hormones?
No.
No, that's another tool that's not in my toolbox if I'm an organic farmer. Okay, so just a couple of those limitations. How about though, if I'm an organic farmer, can I use chemical pesticides and fertilizers?
As long as they're organic chemicals.
Exactly, and that's one of those differences that I think gets lost on a lot of people, especially if you go to social media. The internet, we sort of hear that that's the big difference. Organic farming does not use chemical pesticides and fertilizers, but the reality is that they do. They just use different ones, and in some instances, it's actually the same ones, because our conventional producers are using the ones that the organic producers are using, right?
What's most effective.
Yeah, so in that sense of the chemical pesticides and fertilizers, the conventional farmers just have more tools in that toolbox. They have more choices when it comes to it, but they all do use them. And I think that's an important thing to remember.
So then when we talk about a conventional organic blend, does that then just mean a farm that chooses to grow some of what they produce organically and they choose to grow some of what they produce conventionally?
Exactly. And that's because it affords them more choices. Mm-hmm. So depending on what scenario arises, what if that specific natural pesticide isn't working? And so they do have to go something that's a little bit more effective. Yeah. They have the opportunity to do that. Or let's say, more importantly, if I'm working with animals and I have an animal that gets an infection that needs an antibiotic and all of the other stuff isn't working, so I want to give her that antibiotic, I have the opportunity to help that animal get better and then move it to a conventional herd. Again, waiting for those withdrawal periods and make sure that animal is completely healthy before it becomes any human consumed product.
That makes sense.
But it just affords them more choices.
So then what is the benefit, or why would a farmer decide to go organic? Because it kind of sounds like you're limiting your toolbox in that way. If you decide to produce something there, what's the benefit to that?
So, I mean, I can't speak for all of the farmers. Everybody kind of has their own reasons as to why they choose to grow in that manner. I know from a general standpoint, one of the advantages is, well, you kind of charge more for it, right?
Yeah,
I mean, there is a market for it.
For that.
Yes, there definitely is. But again, with that comes challenges as well. And so that's something that our farmers have to weigh when they're deciding how they're going to produce food on their farm. But consumer demand comes and plays a large role in that too.
That makes sense.
For sure.
All right, so the natural, what does that mean?
So if I were to ask you what natural meant to you, what would you say? I'm putting you on the spot.
Well, it's going to be in that one like aisle of the grocery store, right, where everything is sort of like prettier, and there's like, you know, containers of stuff, and you can fill it in your own. That's what I think of when I hear natural.
That's that aisle, right? So if I asked you, like, what's the difference between grape and a natural grape? What would you tell me?
I mean, that would imply that the other grape is unnatural in some way. So I don't really know what that means, though. I don't have a definition I can give you for that.
And just like you don't have a definition, the FDA doesn't have a definition for it either, right? And so I think that's the important thing to keep in mind when you're looking at labels at the grocery store, because it is used specifically as a marketing term, not as a growing or production practice.
Gotcha.
Okay, and that's important to remember.
That makes sense. All right, so let's talk about however they grow them in Arizona, right? Whether it's organic, whether it's conventional, whether it's a blend, whether they can put that label of natural. We have some of our key crops and commodities here in Arizona that we're a little proud of. We're going to brag a little bit today.
And I love this guy right here.
Look at how fluffy he is.
Oh my gosh. So cattle and calves happens to be our top commodity this year. It does kind of seesaw back and forth with number 2 with dairy. Changes places a lot. But as you might imagine, cattle is going to be some of our top commodity because it's one of Arizona's 5 C's. It was important at our statehood, which was, put you on the spot,
in 1912.
February 14th, 1912, right? And it is still a very important 5C today. We have just under 1 million head of cattle here in the state.
And that 1 million head is spread out between basically 2 different types of cattle production. So the first is going to be ranching, which is sort of what you think of in that cowboy era, right? You've got cattle that are out free range. You have a rancher that tends for those cattle on X number of acres, right? So it's very spread out. Ranching is really beneficial, especially in a state like Arizona, where we have a lot of vegetation that humans can't eat. And so cattle are able to take that vegetation and turn it into a product that humans can use. Ranching has a ton of environmental benefits in terms of that vegetation and what animals can do when they graze properly, how that helps native plants grow and thrive, and how it actually creates wildlife habitat as well. And so you'll see a lot of deer and elk and other things that we like to see on cattle ranches because they're so well cared for by the rancher. And the other side of that cattle industry is going to be your cattle feeders. And so that's when you hear a term like a confined animal feeding operation or a CAFO, that's what we're talking about. So we have a large number of animals concentrated on a relatively small amount of space. And then those animals are fed a very specific diet, cared for very specifically to get them from the weight that they come to the feedlot to a weight that is heavy enough for them to actually be processed and turned into a product.
And a fun fact about cattle and calves, that is the one commodity that is produced in all of Arizona's counties.
That's right.
So all 15 counties. So
that's right.
Kind of seems appropriate that it is one of our top commodities.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So we're moving on, not from the species of bovine necessarily. I don't know if bovine is a species. I don't remember biology.
You're getting technical.
Anyways, but we're still talking about cows. That's what I'm trying to get at. And like Katie said, dairy and beef really do leapfrog one another from year to year in terms of our top grossing commodity here in Arizona. And so dairy is still a really big deal. We've got about 211,000, almost 212,000 dairy cows in Arizona. And Katie, why is that something that's unique, or why is dairy such a big deal here?
Well, so later I'm going to give you a very cool fact about dairy here in the state. I don't want to give that away quite yet for that fact, but one of the things that you will notice here when we're talking about dairy cattle versus something like, let's say, Wisconsin, right? What would you notice on a Wisconsin dairy farm versus a dairy farm here in Arizona?
So on a Wisconsin farm, I feel like it's going to be smaller.
Okay.
You know, there's going to be kind of more like the, there's just going to be a lot of them, and there's not going to be as many cows.
Okay. And how come though?
I don't know.
Well,
Why?
think about that other C in the 5 C's.
I'm thinking
Not cattle,
climate,
but climate, right? So here in Arizona, because of our climate, our dairy cattle are kept outside. And so our dairy farms here look very different than most other states you go to. And the majority of that is the size. And we're going to break them down by size here in just a moment. But I do love this fact that on average here in Arizona, our dairy cows will produce just under 24,000 pounds of milk per cow per year.
Wow.
Now, when we're thinking of terms of like pounds of milk, though, what does that mean? Well, a gallon of milk weighs about, do you know?
Pounds?
Yeah, about 8.6
right.
pounds.
All
So
right.
yeah, that jug you get from the refrigerator. So if you do the math, you can figure out how many gallons are coming from that cow. But our cows here are very productive, and that's because of the amazing care they get from our dairy farmers.
Definitely.
And you'll notice there are a couple of different ones here on the screen. We've got a Holstein, which is our black and white, which I think everybody thinks of
Right.
when they think of dairy cows.
I mean, it's just good marketing, right?
Yeah. And then we have that adorable brown cow over there. And no, that's not our chocolate milk cow. That is our Jersey.
Those Jersey eyes, those are one of the characteristic. Look at those big old brown eyes and those lashes. They'll get you every time. Every time.
And they are a little bit smaller of an animal than the Holsteins, as you can even tell by the head size there.
Yeah.
But they do produce more butterfat or fat in their milk. And so a lot of our dairies will actually have sort of Holsteins and Jerseys together because they get premiums on their milk if that fat content is at a certain level.
Yeah.
So they can mix the milk of the Holstein and Jerseys to bring it up. And so great ones to have.
The genetics of dairy cattle are actually really fascinating. And again, it's one of those, a whole separate webinar topic. But if you ever have a chance to talk to a dairy farmer who's really keyed into that, it is just, it's incredible what they've been able to do in terms of their breeding programs to get that premium on their milk.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. And
even things as simple as horns and no horns.
Right.
Hold and
Right.
Yeah, fascinating. So the landscape of dairy here, we have about 186 dairies in the state. Here's a breakdown of size. We have quite a few of them that have over 5,000 cows, which is pretty cool. But you can see the majority of them kind of range in that 1,000 to 2,500 cows.
Yeah. Just still a lot of cows.
There's a ton of cows, especially if you're milking them 2 or 3 times a day.
Exactly.
Do the math. Lots of cows.
Lots of cows need a lot of labor. All right, then there's lettuce. We always hear about lettuce in Arizona for a very, very good reason. If you're watching this and you're in an ag class, chances are you've probably heard the term winter lettuce capital of the world. The world, which, I mean, we say it, you know, kind of tongue in cheek now, but it's true, and it's really, really impressive. So lettuce is a huge industry in Arizona that grosses about $891 million every single year.
A lot of green.
That's a lot of green, both in money and in lettuce. I like your puns today, Katie. They're going strong. And so we talk about this. This is another one where Arizona's climate really comes into play because, one, we have an amazing irrigation system where we tap into the Colorado River, which means we're able to bring that water down into places like Yuma, who then have a fantastic climate for growing these products. Lettuce actually really thrives in places where it doesn't rain a lot because rain equals fungus, it equals mildew, things you do not want and cannot have on leafy greens. So when you have a climate like Yuma that's nice and warm, there's plenty of sun, there's not a huge chance that it's going to get a lot of rain, leafy green crops can thrive, especially with the irrigation technology that we have.
And I think when people think lettuce, they kind of just forget how many types and varieties of lettuce.
Right.
I know the last time I went to Yuma and was hanging out with one of our folks there on his farm, and he's like, "Oh, this is this. And I'm like, "I'm sorry, spring mix, lala mix." It just goes on and on.
I mean, because I go to this store and I buy romaine every time.
That's just what I think.
I buy
of
green
too.
leaf if I'm being real fancy, but that's
right. Green leaf, red leaf.
Yeah.
So many different types. So definitely encourage people in those winter months, if they can, get to Yuma to see those fields.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing.
They're the most colorful thing I think I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know Farm Bureau has some videos too, so you can always hit YouTube
definitely.
and hit some of the videos to see those.
Maybe we'll link them by the blog or by the
That's a good idea.
by the webinar.
There's some links there.
I like it. All right, so hogs. This is like the thing, I think, one of the very classic quintessential farm animals, right? It's one of the noises we learned to make as kids.
Old MacDonald
right? Had them, definitely,
Yeah.
but I don't usually think of these when I think of Arizona.
Yeah, we actually have about 180,000 pigs here in the state of Arizona. As you can see, $856 million industry, which is pretty amazing when you consider the vast majority of our pigs live on one farm in Snowflake, Arizona, which is owned by Smithfield Foods. It's called Pig for Farmer John. They have about 120,000 sows on their farm. So that is our principal market hog farm.
Okay.
We do have lots of other farms who are producing, or they're there for breeding, and they're doing the show pigs that our 4-H and FFA members are using at County Fair and all of those other shows. But the vast majority of our hogs actually come from PFFJ. They're in Snowflake, Arizona, right there next to Belly Button, another place you maybe not have heard of before.
But it's still important. All right, and then there's hay, and I think this is one of those that people are probably more familiar with it than they realize because there is still so much alfalfa production kind of around in our suburbs of Phoenix especially. And this is a crop that I actually end up talking about a lot in terms of being the government relations specialist. Yeah. You would be kind of probably surprised at how much I talk about hay. And that's because hay is kind of I would say a misaligned or a misunderstood crop, right? Alfalfa hay, by the way, when I say hay, I'm typically, like this picture is obviously alfalfa. Hay can come in different forms, right? You can have hay that's made out of grasses, you can have oat hay.
Bermudas,
right.
stands, all those things.
Exactly, but I'm kind of specifically talking about alfalfa hay or other alfalfa hay here, but other forage crops can be kind of looped into the same category. But it's a water intensive crop. And so it does use quite a bit more water than something like maybe a barley would use. And so a lot of times people look at this crop and they go, well, why are we growing this in the desert? Why are we growing alfalfa hay in a place where we just don't get enough rain to support that? And there are quite a few reasons for that, actually. Goes back to one of my favorite C's in our 5 C's, and that's our climate. In Arizona, again, we're relatively dry. This picture doesn't necessarily show that.
It looks good though.
It looks great. I think all the hay farmers who look at that are like, wow, I'm really glad that's baled and not just lying out in the field pre-baled while that storm front is coming through. But our climate is relatively dry, but we have a great controlled irrigation system, which means that we can get about 8 to 10 cuttings of alfalfa hay per year. Our growing season is really long and our hay is really productive in between cuttings. Compare that to the rest of the country that averages about 2 or 3 cuttings per year. So
now let me break this down for them a little bit too, because if you're not familiar with hay, even that term cutting kind of is confusing. So hay, as you mentioned, is a grass. So I want everybody to think about the grass in their front yard, okay? And every weekend you got to go cut that grass, okay? And so you're taking out the tops. What do we do? we bag it and we probably throw it in our green
maybe
dumpsters,
yeah,
you know,
compost it or
or compost, right? We do what we do.
That's
okay?
right.
But our hay farmers, when they cut or when they mow, when they cut, all of those clippings go to become these bales.
That's right.
And then that grass continues to grow, and then they'll be able to cut it again. So they can get that 8 to 10 times. Whereas in the other states, when you mentioned it's 2 to 3, they will cut, bale, wait, cut, bale,
yep.
And then the nutrient content is just not there for the hay anymore.
That's
and
right.
So what they actually will do is disc up, and they'll have to replant if they can in the season. And so that's kind of what that means, the 8 to 10 cuttings versus 2 to 3 on a single crop planting.
Yeah. So that's one reason that we grow it well here in Arizona, right? And that we continue to grow it is because it grows so well and it can be so productive. But the other reason that it's really important for us to grow hay here in Arizona is those first two commodities we talked about, our cattle industry and our dairy industry. Katie, what do cows eat?
Well, it depends if you're going based on what I know or if we're going off the internet. If it's the internet, it's corn. But if we look at reality, 90% of what they're consuming, over 90%, is the forages.
That's
so
right.
It's the hay.
It's these forage crops. It's a great source of protein. It's a great source of roughage or fiber. It is exactly what a cow needs to produce either the beef that we eat or the milk that we drink. And so this product, this crop supports our top two industries. Without a ruddy source of hay that is close to the farm, so you're not paying a lot of money to transport it, which also means, Katie, you're not using a lot of gas to transport it.
Yes.
So that's really important too. Without that, we couldn't have those top two industries that create so much of the product that we eat, so much of the affordable protein that we eat. This really is the powerhouse of the two big commodities, the big two in Arizona. And so we're really proud of our alfalfa hay and our other roughages. We have about 348,000 acres, almost 350,000 acres across the state. That's 2.6 million bales, which is a lot.
That's a lot.
Which is a lot. I'm really glad I have not had to, stack that many bales of hay in my life. And about $488 million. So
it's important, not even from the financial standpoint, but as you said, how it supports all those other commodities as well.
That's right.
Now, I'm not sure who in the room likes cantaloupe, but we actually, okay, so we got one who does, one who doesn't. You can't see us, so you're going to have to guess who likes it and who it's maybe not their favorite melon. But here for cantaloupe, if we switch over, we'll see that it's a pretty substantial commodity here in the state of Arizona. It's $86 million to our economy. And as you'll learn later, I'll remind you again, we're actually number 2 in the production of cantaloupe. So
number 2.
Yeah, important.
All right, one of my favorite leafy greens here, spinach.
Okay, Popeye.
I know. I didn't used to like it, and then apparently, I don't know, I got older.
Spinach is good.
Spinach is really good. It's good. Versatile, but yeah, grow a lot of it here in Arizona as well. It's about an $83 million crop. And notice that we do actually separate this out from like our leafy green lettuces.
Yes.
Right?
Different. So might be mixed in that value-added product of mixed salads at the end, but yeah. Okay, this is one of my favorites because most people don't know that we have dates here in Arizona. No, I'm not talking about the one you went on last Friday night, Chelsea. These actually grow on our date palm trees, right? And they kind of remind me of like big giant raisins, if you don't know what a date is.
Yeah,
the look of it, it's just giant.
That's a good way to put it. It's a big giant, kind of like a dried looking fruit.
Sweet. Very sweet.
So if you're ever I'll go in maybe all the way to San Diego or going to Yuma, there is a place called Date Land. Literally, they grow a lot of dates there. It looks a lot like this, and date shakes are kind of their specialty. And
it's the medjool dates are the big thing here in Arizona. And I know you were saying you love the medjool dates wrapped in
bacon and smoked on the Traeger. They are, it's delicious. Fantastic. I would much rather have them that way than in the date shake.
So next time you need to go on a date, take them to Dateland, get a date shake, learn all about them. But it's a $66 million economic impact here in Arizona.
So not only a good date idea, but a great trivia piece to break the ice.
That's right.
I love it. And then cotton, again, one of our 5 C's.
5 C's,
So
5 C's.
at that, outside of the state was an extremely important crop. We're going less and less of it in Arizona, but that definitely hasn't diminished its importance both to our industry and just to the culture of the industry in our state here in Arizona as well. So, Katie, have you ever used like a Pima cotton sheet or paid for a Pima cotton shirt?
I have.
Yeah, I have too. They're so nice. They're so soft. Pima cotton, when we say that, what we're referring to is a long staple cotton. And all that means is that the fiber, that white fluffy stuff that you see, is longer in that Pima cotton than it is in maybe another variety of cotton. And so because it's longer, it's a higher quality, tends to be softer, and so that's also why if you see something like that's a Pima cotton product, it might be a little bit more expensive too.
And people might see New York and kind of the high-end fashion markets, they might see Sapima cotton used by those big high-end clothes designers.
That's right.
And it's pretty cool to know that it came from here.
That's right. We're kind of proud of that, right? Because U of A actually had a very big hand in developing that alongside some of our Arizona cotton farmers. So we're a little bit proud of that. We like to brag about that.
So we love Pima, but what's the other one called?
The other one's typically called upland cotton, or you're just here short staple cotton. And oh, sorry, Katie's giving me this. I didn't realize there was another thing on the website, and I couldn't quite tell what she was telling me to do. All right, so upland cotton, that's the most commonly grown type of cotton in Arizona and across the nation. Just a little bit easier to grow, not quite as finicky of a crop. And so we have a very significant crop of both of those in Arizona. When we talk about bales, this number underneath, the 28.5 for Pima and about 437,000 for upland, bale of cotton weighs about 450 pounds.
A little different than our hay bales.
That's right. A little different than our hay bales, but they're the same shape.
Yeah.
That's about the only
thing. And if you want some perspective from a bale of hay, that is kind of hovers that 480. We kind of say in general 500, right? But it's kind of anywhere in there. And so a bale of cotton can get you 215 pairs of blue jeans, finished blue jeans. So kind of think of it in that perspective.
Yeah. Gives you a little bit of a frame
or
of reference.
$312,100 bills. That happens to be my favorite.
I kind of wish that, I bet the cotton farmers wish that
it was worth it. I know, right? They
Get
the short end of that stick.
That's right. But it is still, like I said, a significant industry in Arizona for about $31 million. So Katie, now is your favorite part of this webinar.
It is, because I like to talk about this all the time. And we've learned already, right? $23 billion industry. Arizona agriculture is super important to our state's economy. But it's not all about us, or kind of it is. Because when you look at Arizona agriculture and the impact that it has on a national level, it's powerful, especially for those who think we only grow cactus. So we actually rank in the top 5 in many different commodities.
Wow.
So I'm going to share those with you now, so I'm super excited. So we kind of already hit on this one that we are number 1 in alfalfa yields per acre, right? So the amount of hay that's coming off each acre, those bales. And then we, of course, are the winter lettuce capital of the world. A lot of that coming from Yuma, Arizona, but also a lot from Maricopa County as well. So big deal for our leafy greens. Now we're number 2 in like 5 things, which is amazing. So that's honeydew, cantaloupe, lemons, cows per dairy, and also cauliflower. So I'm hoping you participate in all of those things. But we are known for those and rank in the top 2. And then we're number 3 in tangerines, and then also that Pima cotton that we talked about just a couple of slides ago. So we are on the map.
For sure.
Important.
Yep. That's right. All right, so I'm going to send back to us, because now that we've learned a little bit more about, what.
Before we get into all about us.
Okay.
I think we need to share some of those fun facts, right? If you've ever been in a room and it's like awkward and that small talk and you're like, meh. Or because you're in an agriculture class, people assume you know everything there is to know about agriculture, right? Or because you raise a sheep, you now know about everything else. So I'm going to arm you with just a couple of fun facts. So if somebody says, oh, well, you guys grow more than cactus, you can throw these out there and look cool.
Yeah.
So Arizona actually produces, and this is nearing 90% now, this is amazing, of rose bushes.
So are we talking like the rose bushes that we plant in our yard?
Yeah. They come from Lowe's, Home Depot, Walmart, or your amazing neighborhood nursery as well, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And even crazier, we only have 4 families here in Arizona that produce them. So if you ever travel to the west side of the valley along that 303 loop, oh goodness, you're in for beautiful picture for sure.
Go to the zoo, see all the rose bushes.
That's right. And then, of course, as we've said numerous times already, we produce 90% of the leafy greens during those winter months. So mostly Yuma, of course.
Wherever you are in the nation, you're probably going to be eating.
Yeah, you travel to visit Aunt Susie Christmas.
That's right.
Lettuce came from here. And this is one that is kind of growing, and I don't think a lot of people realize the southern Arizona is now the 3rd largest wine grape growing region in the country.
Mm-hmm.
We produce a lot of award-winning wines here in Arizona.
And it, again, all goes back to that sea, right? That climate that really just works well for wine grapes.
Super important. And maybe wine's not your thing because, of course, you're not old enough yet, but I'm sure beef is. And our Arizona ranchers produce enough beef to feed about 4.6 million Americans each year.
Yep.
So again, just about 1 million head of cattle producing that beef for us. So
pretty important.
There are your fun facts for the day.
That's right. When you have to list a fun fact for some kind of icebreaker, we just gave you 4. So there you go.
So now we'll switch over to our smiling faces. I'm so sorry you can't see us talking the whole time. We try and make it entertaining, but you can't see the theatrics that are happening.
Katie's hand motions are, half the joy, and so we can't see all of it.
And now that we've been doing all this virtual stuff, I feel like I have more facial expressions than hand gestures, so I'm trying to work on that. But now I think it's important that we bring it back around to Farm Bureau.
Yeah.
And kind of let people know a little bit about who Farm Bureau is and what Farm Bureau does in support of all of this Arizona agriculture that we have. And so we like to use the term ACEs.
That's right.
ACEs. What does it stand for?
So the ACEs stands for the 3 things, the 3-legged stool that is the Arizona Farm Bureau. And it's the 3 things that we do on behalf of our members that really help both promote, protect, and educate about this awesome industry that we just talked so much about. And so that first A, it's actually an acronym. It stands for advocacy, communication, and education. And so that A in ACEs is advocacy. And that, of course, is where my department comes in. The Government Relations Department is the one that sort of spearheads our advocacy efforts on behalf of the industry. Now, Katie, I keep saying on behalf of the industry. So what I mean by that is that it's not me going out there saying, this is what I, Chelsea, think is important for you, Mr. Politician or Mrs. Politician, to do for agriculture. Instead, it's me going out there and saying, hey, I have all these members and they've come to us and they've talked about the policies that matter to them. And this is what they're saying, and this is why you need to listen. And so that's what grassroots really means. So I don't just have grass on this slide because it's an agricultural reference and it shows a really interesting soil profile. I have it because that's the heart of the Farm Bureau is our members. Our members are the ones who come to us and say, these are my issues. These are the things that need to happen to strengthen our industry or protect our industry. And then they trust me and the rest of our staff to go out and communicate those things to government agencies, to elected officials, to whoever that may be.
Through advocacy. And
exactly. And so whether that's at the state capitol, whether that's at the Capitol in DC, we are out there, speaking on behalf of our members. And the other thing that is really important about this advocacy piece is, okay, how do we figure out what our members have to say? And so we spend quite a bit of our year going out and hearing what our members have to say. And we have very well developed processes for doing that, whether that's through our state policy or our county policy meetings, or the picture that you see is actually a snippet of a video. So definitely encourage you to go to our website, watch the whole thing. But this is 2 of our elected leaders at the American Farm Bureau stage talking about what's important for Arizona agriculture with the rest of our 50 states and Puerto Rico. So It's something that I'm passionate about, obviously, is going out and making sure that our members' voices are heard. We also have a political action committee, which is something you've probably maybe heard of, but don't necessarily know what it is.
We call that a PAC, right?
PAC, exactly. Yeah. And so a PAC is just a way for people to financially support candidates that they believe in for particular issues. So maybe, it doesn't make a lot of sense for me to go give a financial contribution to one candidate, but it makes sense for me to contribute to a PAC because they're going to support multiple candidates who all stand for the same values. And so Ag PAC of the Arizona Farm Bureau is the PAC that we use to do that. And of course, we're extremely active right now because I don't know if you noticed, but there is an election coming up. So
that's what's happening.
Yeah, that's why all the commercials for everything are the same thing. But yeah, so that's just sort of a little snapshot of what we do on behalf of our members here in the advocacy department.
Awesome. And they do a great job, by the way.
Thanks, Katie.
You won't toot your own horn.
Appreciate that.
So the C in ACES stands for
communication. And so communication obviously is key, and it means a lot of different things in this context when we're talking about what the Farm Bureau does. So the first thing is communication with consumers, whether it's on the radio, with food facts that they might hear, whether it's through blog articles like we have on Fill Your Plate. The communications department really is out there trying to give every Arizonan the opportunity to hear a positive message and a fact-filled, truthful message about agriculture on a daily basis. And so they work really hard to do that through multiple media outlets. But then there's also communication with kind of us, right? With our family, with our members. And so we do that through social media, of course, is an important way to do that. We have a newsletter that goes out to all of our members called Arizona Agriculture that goes out about monthly, not quite every month. But then the other way that we do that communication with our members is through the outreach that we do with our members. And so kind of underneath this communication umbrella is all of our field staff that are going out working so hard to help our county farm bureaus do all that communication with us and do the events in their county and make sure that their voices are being heard as a county so that then they can get kind of surfaced up to the state. So this is a huge umbrella. If you interact at all with us on our social media sites, that's basically our communications team and what they do.
Yeah, they do a great job.
They do. It's constant, right? You are seeing all kinds of ag facts and faces of Arizona ag. So there's that's kind of outward, but there's a lot that happens behind the scenes as well.
Definitely. Yeah, a lot of webinars and training and keeping them up to date on changes with employment and even during this time of COVID, right? The rules and regulations and things they can apply for. And so advocacy and communications pair up for that a lot. And I think that's the interesting thing when you look at ACES, we kind of have it separated. Advocacy, communication, education, but really we're all always working together because every component requires the other one's help. It's
true,
right?
Yeah. I mean, nothing happens in a vacuum here. And I think that's actually a really good lead in to your department, Katie, of education, because what I like to say is that, in advocacy, I go out and I try to inform lawmakers about the right things and the truth about agriculture. And then our communications department is out there trying to inform consumers about the true things about agriculture. But education is out doing that for students. So if you do your job well enough, I won't have anything to do.
Yeah, and I'd like to think we are that good. And you know me, I'm a very optimistic, positive person, but I'm grateful that you'll always be around. But maybe our messaging will be able to change just a little bit. So yeah, for the education team, our big focus is our youth. Of course, we still get to have those interactions with teachers who are consumers. They might be those older consumers, but they still have many of the same misconceptions that the students do. And so it's our privilege to work with that demographic every day. And we do that through a variety of ways. We'll either be in the classrooms ourselves giving presentations. Tori is our Ag in the Classroom manager, and she does an amazing job.
She does.
She hangs out with the little kids, mostly those elementary kids. And then I find my way into usually high school and college courses now, but thankfully Tori lets me back in those elementary classes every once in a while. Everybody needs a hug from a kindergartner every once in a while just to make you smile.
It's true.
And so aside from from giving the classroom presentations, though, we are always working behind the scenes to develop new curriculum and resources for our teachers to use or to access when they're just looking for those bits of information to share with their students. So that they have some countering information aside from what they're seeing on some of those social media and internet posts. It's a way to connect those students with their farmers and their ranchers. And so we can do that through some of our very targeted programming, Farm Friday Fun. That's a digital curriculum that goes out every month. With all this online learning, you guys have all probably experienced a bit of the Bitmoji classroom. And later this week, in fact, Wednesday, we'll be releasing 15 Bitmoji classrooms, all having to do with the agricultural commodities, many of which we just talked about, as a way to engage and interact with our students in the classroom. And thanks to this online education that's occurring as well, Tori and I have found ourselves to be the stars of many videos that have gone out. And so I'm just grateful that our team has the personality to roll with the punches and have a little bit of fun. And I think that's an easy way for people to connect with us and to hear the message, right? We're able to bring everything down to that little lower level and help them understand, because we're finding it doesn't matter if you're in kindergarten or high school or college or 60. A lot of people have those same misconceptions because of the information that's out there, right. And they're just removed from the farming range, so they don't know.
Yeah, it's not anything that's malicious. It's just a gap of communication. And so being able to have a department that does just a phenomenal job in creating those resources and distributing those resources is a huge asset here at the Arizona Farm Bureau. So we're really thankful for you guys.
And as part of Arizona Farm Bureau, we have the Farm Bureau's Educational Farming Company, which is basically our education foundation. And so we're able to raise a lot of funds to help out with those youth programs that are encouraging youth to be involved in agriculture and promoting that factual and accurate information as well. So that's where we get to do a lot of our outreach with FFA and 4-H and the Arizona Ag Teachers Association. It's all run through that foundation. Gotcha. So that's an important piece that many of our members support.
Yeah, definitely. And I think too, it's important as we talk about sort of what we do here at what we call, sorry,
you're clicking to us.
Oh yeah.
We're done, so they might as well see us.
That sounds good.
I know, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It's new, we're learning, but now they get to see us here, And I think it's important too, as we kind of look at, what we just talked about with our ACEs, which is what the Farm Bureau Federation does, to remind folks too that if you're not familiar with that, you've probably heard of Farm Bureau because you've heard of it from an insurance standpoint.
Financial services.
Exactly. Yeah. And so Farm Bureau doesn't just offer, this sort of like advocacy protection for farmers and ranchers and for consumers and people, everyday people, but we have this other side of things that offers that financial protection as well. And so we're this whole package for the agricultural industry to say, okay, we're going to be over here protecting our livelihoods from a financial standpoint and protecting our livelihoods from an advocacy and education standpoint. And so it just really makes me proud to work for an organization like that that's so dedicated to the health and the well-being and the longevity of our agricultural industry. So it's pretty fun. It's good.
So
good to work.
Now you guys kind of know where our hearts are. Right? We laid them out there for you, but hopefully today you got a little taste also of the scope of Arizona agriculture and that it's definitely more than cactus. It's all of those different commodities and it's this whole family of people.
Yeah.
So we encourage you to continue learning about Arizona agriculture by visiting us at azfb.org. You can find any of our program pages there. We also have some amazing YouTube channels. So just search I think Friends of
Arizona Farm Bureau on Facebook. Yeah. I think it is also that on YouTube, Ag in the Classroom.
AZFB AITC, that's where the comical videos are.
That's where the fun stuff is. But yeah, just tons of resources to throw out there. So if you're ever looking for something that, I have this question about agriculture or I need to prove this point about agriculture, that's literally what we're here for.
Hit azfb.org.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you for joining us. So whether you did it live or after the fact, we're just so happy to be here and to be back in your classrooms, whether those are in person or virtual right now. We will be back next month. with another fun, exciting, interactive webinar.
Wait for the promo to see what it is. Surprise.
It's a good time. But until then, if you need anything, we just gave you our website. Let us know. But we're happy to be a resource for anything that you might need.
Thanks.
Bye, guys.
So